Well, on Monday, the organized private sector called for a review of the tax bills, particularly the proposed VAT increase, which they argued could discourage investment. The Association of Capital Market Academies of Nigeria and the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce expressed concern over the VAT hikes from 7.5% to 15% by 2030 and the removal of tax provisions for free trade zones. The organized private sector presented their concerns at a two-day public hearing on the tax reforms organized by the Senate Committee on Finance. Well, joining me for more on this, I have Kenneth Erikume. Kenneth Erikume, by the way, is partner tax reporting and strategy at PwC. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Perpetua, for inviting me.
All right, so first I want to begin by asking what your general overview of the ongoing public hearing at the National Assembly is.
Right, so as you well know, this is part of the process for passing out a new legislation. So after the second reading, if there are no dissenting views, then it's handed over to the committee level, where one of the things that needs to happen is a public engagement to actually get feedback from the public on what they have read. So far, the conversations have been going quite well. I have one of my colleagues out there in Abuja who's been giving me an update, and feedback is being taken from stakeholders. I think one of the big challenges we may have, though, is that a lot of people have not been able to digest and read the bills. These bills on their own, they're quite a lot. For example, the Nigeria tax bill consolidates all the tax laws at the federal level that existed, from VAT to personal income tax, to companies income tax, to petroleum profits tax, to the PIA, and so on, or the fiscal portions of the PIA. So it's quite a large document, and I think for us to really get value out of the process, a lot of the conversations need to be sectorial based. So the sectors that are impacted need to come and engage with the specific issues that relate to them, because no one person could have read all these, all the provisions and would be equipped to actually give sufficient feedback. But overall, I think the process has gone quite well. People have been allowed to speak, and feedback is being taken. What happens after this is, the process is in the hands of the National Assembly. So despite the feedback, they're not bound to automatically amend the bills. So the issue has to be quite significant from their perspective, or have a significant, adverse consequence for them to take that and then revisit the drafting, and then present whatever they have to the General House. So I think that's the process, but overall, I think things have gone well.
Well, you talked about sectoral-based sort of conversations. Does that sort of suggest that you have your discontent with maybe the sort of people we're having or the way it is going?
I would say, maybe because I'm a tax expert, so I'm quite, locked into the technical details. So I really fully understand the import of the bill. A lot of the conversations have, based on the feedback I've gotten, they've not really dealt with some of the most important issues. And people, you could hear the Senate president alluding to some of that, it's no longer time to be engaging on social media conversations. If you want to engage, you must have read the bill and understand the technical details for there to be contribution. I would say early on, in terms of the feedback I got, some of the conversations were really peripheral and not going into the technical detail of some of the things which could be quite impactful, both from a corporate context and an individual context. So that's the reason why I said, the sectoral, engagement, because when you have a particular industry where there's an issue that's burning for them, then they're able to engage on that particular matter. So that's, for me, what I meant when I alluded to that.
Okay, so you talked about two things now. You said that the most important things that not necessarily being addressed now. We're seeing peripheral engagements and all of that. And apart from that, you keep talking about this sectoral engagement. So talk to us. What are these important things that you feel that, so many persons are not paying attention to?
All right, thank you very much. I think one of the most important ones is, while the law has deleted the minimum tax provision, so currently corporates pay 0.5% of their gross turnover if they are loss making, or their taxes fall below the minimum tax. The way the law has been amended, and this is sort of trying to get Nigeria ready for the implementation of what we call Pillar 2 of the OECD. It has introduced a 15% minimum tax on all corporates. So whether you're, in the customs territory, or whether you're in a free zone, and even if you're in a free zone and you're exporting all your products, you do not get a tax exemption automatically. In fact, you get a tax exemption, but it is capped that you must pay 15% of your profit as income tax. And this also has an impact for Nigerian multinationals as well. So when you have a Nigerian headquartered company that has subsidiaries in other countries, for your Nigerian operations, if you can optimize it and generate, a lot of foreign income, the law still, imposes a 15% minimum tax on corporates. So for me, I think that that's one big issue, which, in terms of the engagement and conversations, needs to be unpacked quite quickly.
Okay, so let's stay a bit on this. We'll come to the other one. Let's stay a bit on this because even Nasima talked about this and they opposed it. I mean, we're talking about tax on free trade zones. Do you think, or don't you think it's going to be counterproductive? I understand what you're talking about the OECD and all of those, but that we're seeing the essence of these zones is actually to bait investors with tolerable tax incentives. And this also negates Section 8 of the Nigerian Export Processing Zone Act 1992 and the Oil and Gas Free Zone Act, which stipulates that approved enterprises operating within a zone shall be exempted from all federal government and state taxes, rates, and from all federal government and state taxes, rates, and levies. What's your thought on that? Are we going to do away with this?
Yeah, so, I mean, the way the bills have been drafted, it means that those laws will essentially be retired in that context. Because the bill would have an overriding impact on those previous acts. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just in terms of, what exactly is our economic strategy with regards to incentivizing companies. Now, you must remember that every country has an incentive strategy. And this is not just the free zones. The impact also extends to what we call pioneer industries. So the pioneer status where you get 0% tax for 3 to 5 years. If we are clear on the sectors and industries we want to incentivize, for example, we can then be clear on the sort of tax exemption we want to grant to those industries. But what has happened is a partial exemption based on the bills. So you get a partial exemption, you get an exemption, but anything that gives you a benefit below 15% of profit will then be taxed. We have to compare what we're doing with other jurisdictions and pay particular focus on what is our competitive advantage or the sort of sectors we want to incentivize. And I think, at this point in time where we're looking at ramping up exports, anything that is export-oriented needs to be targeted for special incentive for us to be able to generate the relevant foreign currency. In addition, anything that allows us to mobilize employment within Nigeria and tap into the global value chain, in terms of outsourcing, in terms of hub services, in terms of holding company jurisdictions, we need to incentivize that. But, it's not like there's no incentive. It's just that the incentive is capped, that, you get an incentive, but you must pay 15% of the profits that you make. The question is whether that's enough in order to spur or incentivize those sectors that we're looking at. Well, of course, the obvious issue that also comes to mind is that some investors would have made specific decisions around, investing into the country on the basis of some of those legislations. And the way the bill has been structured, there is no sunset, or would I call it transition, that allows the phasing out of those incentives over time. So that, for me, I think is, are some of the considerations. I'm not saying it's wrong or right. I'm just saying those are some of the debates that needs to be tackled.
But Mr. Kenneth, let me come in here. Where do you stand exactly? What do you think about this? The incentives, taking away the incentives and not having that sunset clause. I want to know your personal opinion on this.
I think, my personal opinion is that could, one of the things we talk about Nigeria is around the certainty of legislation, because, when we do profiling of Nigeria as a country vis-a-vis other jurisdictions, it's not like Nigeria does not have the market. We have the population. For many years, we also had the purchasing power, even though that was eroded, but I think in 2025, there's a lot of stability, so it will probably start coming back. And you look at all the other ramifications. One of the big things that makes our country red in terms of attracting investment is the stability and certainty of regulations. So an investor wants to be able to come from Europe and say, I'm coming into the country, and there's clarity around all that I'm doing. And this was why the PEBEC was set up at some point to look at how we improve the ease of doing business in Nigeria. One critical consideration: certainty and stability. Okay. So when I put in $1 of investment, there's not going to be a change in the goalpost as my investment hasn't fully matured, but just halfway, things turn around. And we saw this sort of consideration in the oil and gas sector, where for many years the PIA was being debated and people withheld investment because there was no clarity or certainty around the legislation in that space.
Mr. Enrico, I believe the point has been made. There's a lot here. I don't want us to dwell so much on that one. Now, let me just highlight some of the pushbacks we have seen so far. Rejection of incremental increase in the value-added tax and the proposal to stop funding TET Fund, NASENI, and NITSDA with effect from 2030. These are two of the things. And also, the Arewa Consultative Forum recommended that the term derivation be defined, and they are saying that the current definition is ambiguous and they sort of need to understand it. I'd like you to comment on these three issues now.
Okay, so again, the issue of VAT, VAT has always been political, but I would approach it without a political view. I believe that the proposals to amend and reform Nigerian VAT is in the right direction, 100%. And the proposal is twofold. The first thing is to increase the VAT rates, right? But also grant input tax credits for expenditure. Currently in Nigeria, there is only limited scope for claiming your input tax credit on expenditure. So it's only manufacturers and it's only the goods they purchase as raw materials, and traders who buy those goods to resell. Every other person, every expenditure that they incur, the VAT they incur on that is not recoverable, and that adds to the cost of operating a business in Nigeria. So even including your business, New Central, all the expenditure you incur, the 7.5% VAT that you incur, you're unable to charge it and you're unable to recover it against the output VAT you charge to your customers. So what the VAT reform is looking to do is to say, well, we increase the VAT rate so it's in line with all our contemporaries across West Africa, but also allow businesses to claim their input VAT credits on all their expenditure, including capital expenditure. So overall, the impact from a business perspective is not going to be adverse, especially when you look at what they have also targeted for zero rating, which is the essential goods for consumption. So for me, I see no reason why, and this is just me speaking as a technician rather than as a politician. I see no reason why that VAT reform shouldn't go through. Because
at
it's
15%
at
that incremental
best practices.
At that incremental level where we're going to about 15% by 2030, is that the one you want to go on?
Yes, I believe that's in the right direction. 10% 2025, 12.5% by 2029, 15% by 2030. But give us full input tax credit. As a business I run in PwC, that would be better for me than paying 7.5%, but I'm unable to take the VAT credit on the computers I buy, the machines which I incur, and so on and so forth. In fact, many businesses will be in a refund position at the end of the day. The big question will be whether people then pass on the benefits to their customers or retain that margin. But for businesses, it's going to be positive largely. The change, the consolidation of the various funds, the Tertiary Education Tax Fund, NASENI, and so on, into the 4% development levy, and over time is going to be reduced to 2%. I think from a business perspective, it makes perfect sense for me as well, right? Because currently people pay 3% education tax, they pay something to NASENI levy, they pay other things. So, what the reform is trying to do is to consolidate those taxes into one and then reduce it, but it goes up initially, to 4%, and then later reduces over time to 2%. If you work with businesses, you would appreciate, one of the big challenges is the multiplicity of taxes. And the reason why this has happened
the concern of these people is that it's probably going to affect education sector and all of those. Maybe you help us understand how this is going to benefit everybody at the end of the day. If you're saying you don't have to differentiate these things.
Good question. Good question. Now, for every country, right? You just need to do a comparison country by country. The way governments fund their various expenditure, many countries do one tax, right? One income tax, and it is just an income tax, and that's it. It's not what we have done historically is to say, now we want to fund a particular project, we come up with a new tax. Now we want to fund another project, we come up with a new tax. And that's why in Nigeria we have several taxes on corporates. What we need to do is to consolidate those taxes and collect them better.
Okay.
There's no reason why your ability to fund those projects does not improve by you charging more taxes.
Okay, I apologize, we need to go right now. Thank you so much. There's a lot to say, but we have to end it here. Thank you so much, Kenneth Irukeme, Partner, Tax Reporting and Strategy, PwC Nigeria. Thank you for your thoughts on the show today.